Alright guys, today I want to talk to you about a villain, okay? His name is Sariel. He looks like a faceless, statuesque, humanoid looking being. But, his true nature is very eldritch in nature, and yeah, he's one of the members of the Legion that used to serve under Lilith, so technically speaking, he's not exactly supposed to exist in Earth-Eye's universe, since he was kind of created by Scrawler rather than the creator, and, Scrawler basically made him and, all the other members of Legion, as well as Lilith and the Great Evils, basically to try and supplant, the universe of Earth-Eye, for himself, and, they kind of became big villains in it, are kind of a reason why, a lot of evil things still happen in the universe, and are kind of, responsible for the box, and are kind of a little responsible for why the box of evils was such a problem. Yeah. And Sariel, kind of, back when, things were getting reformed and he was kind of survivor of, the Dark Age incident, back when, the goddess creation defeated his queen and sealed her away. He was kind of looking, he kind of knew that the light of the moon was going to be the undoing of, his queen, and, the moon back then was big and blue and all that, instead of a silvery white color. And he kind of stole the light of the moon for himself to, try and supplant the power of the moon because he thought, it would, protect his queen from, being destroyed by it if he had the power instead. Of course, he was kind of repelled by, Luna, who was, the guardian of dreams and, was kind of stripped of, most of his power, but, got banished, but basically, managed to survive that, kind of escaped to Earth, where he kind of became a bit of a dictator and was kind of known for being a massive degenerate and, tried to take over the world back in the past before, eventually being defeated again by, some beings a little lower than Lilith and Luna and, the celestial ranking, but, he still managed to survive, and he was kind of, became a wandering spirit after that, and, was kind of the reason that Lumina Night, would become, the vessel of Lilith, since he's the one that kind of approached her with that, back when she was in prison and on the night of the blood moon, back when Lilith's seal was kind of the weakest, which is kind of the only time he was able to manifest into the world, since, since it, gave the power to the powers of darkness. Yeah, and that's kind of how Lumina Night became, became Lilith's vessel, basically. Yeah, and she's, the one that, was responsible for the massacre of the Arcs and why, Indamati, had to flee to the moon in the first place. Because that was, a ruined civilization still long ago. So that's why, Indamati kind of lives on ruins in the moon, basically. As well as under the Guardian of Dreams, who, kind of lives there and kind of, kind of has been reigniting the light of the moon and, kind of awaken, Indamati's true arts to basically be the true art of the moon. Of course, if, Indamati were to defeat Sariel and, get that back the full power of, the true art of the moon, she could become, much more powerful. Yeah. So he's kind of a big obstacle to overcome. Yeah, we have two people with the true art of the moon, though one of them is more or less, a supplanter and, not very legitimate at all, even though he's the one that thinks that Indamati is supplanting him. That's kind of a thing with him. Plus, he's kind of a massive degenerate, so it's like, ugh, he's kind of creepy now. Yeah, could you imagine an Eldritch being all creepy towards women now? Yeah. That's kind of a thing that Sariel was known for a long time ago, yeah. Yeah, you gotta remember back when he was, trying to be a dictator over the world and all that, he was not exactly nice towards, human beings at all. He's also kind of the reason, warfare and violence, got taught to humanity, unfortunately. And why they learned a lot about manipulation, through his power. Of course, that, got defeated a long time ago, so it's no longer relevant now. But the shadows of it still remain. Anyway, some of his techniques are a little bit more ruthless than, Indamati's techniques, since he's more willing to use the Blood Moon a little bit. Since, Indamati has kind of sworn off that, since, the Blood Moon is, kind of connected to Lilith and all that, that's not a good power to use, and that kind of, is why Indamati, becomes active on the Red Moon night. Since, remember, that's, Indamati's, inner darkness that's kind of, welling up in her that she tries to suppress, most of the time. but it kind of comes out under red moonlight corruption. Yeah, Anima will eventually, learn the power to control that, but, not quite yet. Right now I'm trying to suppress it by, this necklace I have on me. It's made out of pure, silver moonstone, so it's, able to suppress, red moonlight radiation poisoning. I wish I could get an item that, protects against iron, but, that's kind of, very rare and legendary, in the fairy world, and, it's kind of considered a lost art to be able to make it in the first place, and, only, like, really high-ranking nobility in Fairyland has that. Well, Titania has one of those. I doubt she'd be willing to give it to me, though. Seeing as it's kind of rare and super important and all that. Anyway, that's enough tangents for now. I will see you later. And oh, right. I should probably go over to typing and all that. Let's see. Sariel technically counts as a celestial enemy, though he also counts as demonic. And he's also a light and dark attribute. And he is madness aligned. Wait, should I make him void aligned? Yeah, let's go with void aligned for now. Yeah, I think that would be better. He's kind of. Let's see. He has resistance to light. He has resistance to light, dark, and poison. Yeah, and as well as spirit and martial. But he's weak to physical, as well as dream. Anyway, yeah, and he's kind of associated with the zone of delusion. Yeah. Anyway, I'll see you later. Remember to fly like that and shine like the moon, okay? For weirder stuff dreams are made of. Goodbye now.